Well, hello to you all. It's lovely to be here. It's very buzzy in here. People are still coming into the area we're talking in. But first up, can I ask you all to make sure that you have downloaded the Hop-In app? This is getting you into some of the sessions today, so you have to have that. We don't want you to miss anything. And if you haven't done so already, get tapping on the App Store, and then we're ready to rumble. Well, a very, very warm welcome to the opening session of our Climate Chamber mission, the biggest and most ambitious trade mission ever carried out by British Chambers of Commerce. We have partners in 10 countries with over 80 participating businesses. We have also more than 60 speakers in 16 different sessions over the next 2 days. We're going to be busy. And we're finally kicking off here. It's all happening with a cracking session in Glasgow, the host of COP26. I am your host for the next 2 days. My name is Claire English, and this is my city. So I'm absolutely delighted and proud to play my part today. Now, we're on a mission to connect with and learn from each other, and ultimately to trade with each other. So there's a terrific program for you to enjoy, comprising keynote speakers, breakouts, discussions, business-to-business meetings, and network and exhibition opportunities. And the event is truly hybrid, with some of our speakers here in person and some joining us virtually over the days. And we've got a live audience here, and we've got you there, so we're all set to go. So whatever way you're doing it, from wherever you are in the world, this represents a unique opportunity for everyone participating to continue to keep the momentum for the mission going after COP26 has left town. We're all about collaboration and innovation and sharing what's worked while being very frank about what we could all be doing better. Now, before I go any further, I need to inform you we're filming this event, so if you've got any objections to that, please speak to a member of staff and let them know, and we'll do what we can to avoid that. On we go. So why Glasgow, you might ask? Well, our opening session is going to explore how Glasgow is capitalising as host city of COP26 and playing a leading role globally in sustainable and circular initiatives. We'll hear from our speakers about the roles played by sustainable and circular organisations and find out how businesses and cities can collaborate internationally to deliver on COP26 ambitions. Our speakers are going to deliver 10-minute keynote presentations, and then the idea is they'll join a panel for a further conversation, maybe about 20 minutes or so of that. There will be questions, so please put them in the chat. We'd like your interaction. It's at the side of your Hop-In app screen. You might know that as well. And we'll try our very, very best to get to your questions. And please don't be shy. Do ask questions. The panels are designed to provide information, but more than that, they're going to open dialogue between the panelists themselves and you, wherever you are, the audience here, where you are. So use that Q&A function, please. The session, as I say, is recorded for internal purposes only. We should mention that this ambitious 2-day event would not have even been possible without huge support. So we'd like to say a very big thank you to the Scottish Government, Scottish Leather Group, the finest, lowest carbon leather, Scottish Water, and thanks for these handy reusable bottles that we've got down here. Let me just show you them. They're fantastic. Love those. That's Scottish Water. City of Glasgow College, this is where we're based for the next 2 days. We also thank Edrington, the owner of a portfolio of ultra-premium spirits, including the Macallan, and last but not least, the British Chambers of Commerce. We're so pleased you've helped to make this event possible. So just to confirm, we're using Hop-In. During the sessions, you'll be accessing us via stage. Follow our panels, make your own comments, and post your questions, because, as I say, this is very interactive. If you're not physically here in Glasgow, we want you to feel as if you are. And please don't forget social media as well. You get us on @Glasgow_Chamber. And please hashtag Climate Chamber Mission, and Scottish Government's hashtag is Let's Do Net Zero. It is time to get started. Whew, a lot of preamble there, but we will get started. Our first keynote speaker is standing by. Dr. Paul Little is the founding principal and chief executive of the City of Glasgow College. This is his campus, so thanks very much for allowing us to use it, Paul. Dr. Little's got a number of strings to his bow. He is the 133rd president of Glasgow Chambers of Commerce. He is also the author and honorary captain of RNR. Passionate about people, skills, and colleges that train young people vocationally, he's a massive advocate for the Chamber's circular work. Paul oversaw the building of the 2 new flagship colleges, the buildings here down by the riverside and the one here, which won various awards and national nominations, including a REBA National Award 2017, which takes into account sustainability, design performance, and procurement. So, without further ado, let's hear from Paul Little. Paul.
Good morning, and could I add a very warm welcome to those present here this morning, and indeed all of those who are joining us virtually. You know, for 400 years, Glasgow crisscrossed the world in mercantile trade. But here we are in COP26, and the world has come to Glasgow. So I'm speaking to you this morning, both as principal of the City of Glasgow College, one of the largest in the world, but also as the president of the Chamber of Commerce, one of the oldest in the world. You know, the world is at a perilous juncture, and Glasgow is hosting perhaps one of the most critical summits ever in our human history. We are in urgent need of unprecedented global political conviction combined with concerted global action. You know, I'm delighted to add my welcome to all those over 80 companies and all those delegates that are here today and are joining us virtually for what is a unique and the largest ever in the world such trade mission. We at the City of Glasgow College, alongside Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, are playing our part, each with about 100 events during COP26. For example, you're meeting here in our business hub. Elsewhere in the city as we speak, there's an international maritime hub where the world's shipping ministers are meeting to debate and discuss decarbonisation here in Glasgow. And that hub was opened by our First Minister just on Friday. Shortly, we will have the United Nations International Maritime Organization joining us alongside the International Chamber of Shipping, as well as Maritime UK. So it's very fitting as a mercantile city that we are using our global convening powers and system leadership to bring all the key players here, both to this event and indeed to our maritime hub. So I'm delighted that Scotland's Super College is actually hosting so many business leaders and indeed hosting so many world leaders and VIPs and top decision makers to come together and help debate and discuss our future. And as a college, we have a global reach. We're now firmly on the world stage. We have business links across 5 continents. We have operate across 29 countries. And you'll be surprised to know that 150 languages are spoken at the City of Glasgow College. So we are perhaps the most cosmopolitan of all UK colleges. But in addition to that, each year some 4,000 international students come to Glasgow to benefit from our world skills expertise in some 2,000 different disciplines. But we've also got green credentials, very important ones, and we've had those for years. Green innovation, green technology, green regulation, and of course, green maritime education and skills. But that's not enough for us. We have actually reduced, since coming into your super campus, which incidentally is future-proof for the next 50 years. In the last 5 years alone, we have reduced our carbon footprint by 33%. As an eco trailblazer, City of Glasgow College was an early signatory to the Sustainable Development Goal Accord, and we've embedded that across our curriculum, across our leadership, across our research, and our day-to-day operations. We've also transformed our waste management. We've also composited all our waste. We have no daily waste. It's all recycled. And indeed, we have invested in 100% fleet of vehicles. We've also provided electrical bikes for our staff between the 2 campuses. And we have banned the single use of plastics at this college. So these are small steps, but those are small steps in a large journey, in a journey of a green revolution. And we hope that the debate and the discussion here this morning helps us all move a little bit in that green revolution. You know, ladies and gentlemen, we will know in a matter of days whether this has been a good COP or indeed a bad COP. We will know if we finally have a how and a when. I hope today helps us a little bit further on that journey. And I would encourage you to all get involved, ask your questions, but to go out after this event and help us all build back greener and build back fairer. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you. Good cop, bad cop, like that one. Okay, now having heard from Paul in his roles as the head of Scotland's largest super college and a major player in the education sector, as well as president of Glasgow Chamber of Commerce, we're going to keep it local for now with some insight from the leader of Glasgow City Council, Councillor Susan Aiken. Now, Susan's held that post since May 2017. She's the first SNP leader of the council. She was awarded the Scottish Local Government Politician of the Year title for her work to deliver equal pay justice for thousands of women in the city under her leadership. And Glasgow was named the host of COP26, a global green city and also European capital for sport for 2023. And fittingly, Susan has launched the Circular Glasgow route map at the end of last year with a city ambition to be circular by 2045. Now, she recently unveiled her administration's Green Print for Investment prospectus, spanning £30 billion of investments and place-based development opportunities. The Green Print is a blend of market-ready opportunities for private capital and radical unlock and scale projects developed to appeal to activist investors seeking to co-design and longer-term economic partnerships as well. The prospectus is key to the city's 2030 target to be carbon neutral and a main platform for Glasgow's economy, climate resilience and a just transition for the city region. I could mention a raft of other projects too, such as scaling up the Clyde Climate Forest by 9,000 hectares, a Glasgow metro connecting the city region, a citywide retrofit programme to make all homes energy efficient. But we'll let Susan say more herself. Councillor Aiken.
Hello. For almost 2 years now, I've spoken about Glasgow's road to COP, counting down the months, the weeks and then the days, and now we have arrived. This is our opportunity to show the world this talented, innovative and globally connected city is ready to grasp the opportunities that this unprecedented global profile and visibility has afforded us. I really believe that these next 10 days can be a defining moment for our planet, but also for Glasgow, the host city of COP26. The changes that the transition to net zero will demand from our city, our communities and our business base aren't going to go away anytime soon. This isn't a fad or a political whim. The climate emergency is the local, national and global priority. 20 years ago, it would have sounded fanciful if someone were to suggest that Glasgow would become an international poster child for community regeneration and an exemplar in social housing, or that we would become a world leader in precision medicine, life sciences, satellite technology, or financial services. But we have. There's nothing inevitable or particular about our challenges, nothing that says that Glasgow will fail where others succeed. And there's nothing to suggest that we can't become a frontier city in the new green economy, securing the investment that will be drawn to the city of COP. We can become the place where the solutions to the urban challenges of sustainability are found. Indeed, what we have is a generational and global opportunity to become that place, the city where ambition, partnerships and expertise delivers a healthy, greener and more prosperous future for all of our citizens. In the build-up to COP, we've had a really compelling story to tell the world. From our role as a cradle of the first industrial revolution, building the ships that enabled an empire and synonymous with quality and innovation, Glasgow and the Clyde were titans of the industrial age. And that has a strong resonance in any discussion about climate. The decline in the second half of the 20th century has left us with the scars of that past, from the motorway cutting through the very heart of our city, the swathes of derelict land, and the social challenges that still loom heavy from that era. I often point this out, and it may seem counterintuitive, but one of Glasgow's greatest assets right now is these very flaws and challenges. The world has not only taken notice of our story, but also the way that we still contend with and respond to the legacies of our past. We are in many ways a quintessential city in transition, and as such, we are an ideal host for COP26. Indeed, the midwife of the Paris Agreement, Christiana Figueres, has said that those attending COP in Glasgow will see a city in transition, and that's something that we want to build on, our typicality. The success of these 2 weeks will be judged on a number of fronts. We all want the name of our city to be forever associated with the moment that the world changes path for a safer, more sustainable course for all of us. Whatever emerges from the Glasgow Accord, the Glasgow Agreement, the Glasgow Pact, that will be a legacy in itself. But there also has to be agreement on the practical solutions that cities must be involved in shaping. What do the solutions to decarbonisation look like? How can they address other long-standing challenges? And how do cities stimulate the finance that will invest in that transition? We have a plan for both seizing this opportunity and for what comes next. Glasgow's Green Deal, delivered in partnership with government, universities, colleges, communities, and of course businesses, the Green Deal roadmap will bring forward the solutions to the climate emergency at scale and pace. Within Glasgow's Green Deal lies the framework to accelerate decarbonisation. In our Glasgow Green Print, which is a key part of the Green Deal, we really get to the core of what the next decade demands. Spanning £30 billion worth of investments and development opportunities that we're inviting international and domestic investors to open discussions with us on. These propositions will not only reduce emissions, adapt to and mitigate climate change, and do the necessary modernisation that the systems upon which cities like ours depend. They will also address poor transport connectivity, stimulate our economy through mass programmes that will create jobs and employment, and make Glasgow a more attractive place to live in, invest in, and address many of our deepest social and economic challenges. Whether it's retrofitting 430,000 homes across the city region, creating new district heat networks, putting a cap on the M8 that cuts through the heart of our city and belches out emissions every single day, or an entirely new transport solution, the Glasgow Metro, connecting up parts of the city region that are just now less well connected. All of that is what I mean about grasping the opportunity, showing the world a willingness and a readiness to become that city, the city of solutions. Hopefully, during discussions over the next 10 days, I can tell you about our work to ensure that Glasgow's citizens have the skills available to seize the opportunities that the new green economy will present to them. How partnership with the private sector is critical to our ambitions. How Glasgow's Indigenous business base, those thousands of businesses for whom the world is rapidly changing, will be supported in their journey to net zero, and how the work that we're doing with the Chamber of Commerce on the circular economy has the potential to really transform how we do business. We have a great opportunity here that makes us the envy of our peers around the world to deliver for Glasgow and to set us on a more modern, a more sustainable and a more prosperous path. Our window may be small, but the potential it brings us is huge. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussions.
Councillor Susan Aiken, and it's so good to hear more about Glasgow's ambitious plans and the opportunities that hosting COP26 presents for the city. Now, we're going to be sticking with Glasgow. We're on a roll now. One of the city's key headquartered businesses, Scottish Power, is part of the Iberdrola Group, one of the world's largest integrated utility companies and a world leader in wind energy. Scottish Power was one of the first principal partners who supported the delivery of a successful and ambitious COP26. The principal partners represent some of the leading energy companies, investors and lenders in the UK, including NatWest Group and National Grid. Additionally, Scottish Power is the first integrated energy company in the UK to generate 100% green energy. Their focus on wind energy, smart grids, and driving the change to a leaner electric future, and they are investing over £6 million every working day to make this happen. Keith Anderson is the Chief Executive Officer, and he's based at the HQ here in Glasgow. He also sits on the Scottish Power Board and has full responsibility for the company's activities in the UK, including the £5.3 billion investment plan to 2022. Let's hear from Keith now.
Good morning. I'm joining you today from Glasgow, which has long been known as the powerhouse of the Scottish economy. If you go back 200 years or so, and Glasgow came of age as the crucible for Scotland's industrial revolution. In fact, the term cloud built became synonymous around the world with the engineering quality and technology innovation from this city. So there's an incredible sense of pride and history here that we can build on as we face the challenges and the opportunities of net zero. They used to call Glasgow the second city of the empire, and with the COP coming here, there's a fantastic platform for Glasgow to become the world's first port of call on action to tackle climate change. From the window of my offices, I can see the turbines of Whiteley, the UK's largest onshore wind farm on the hills above Glasgow. And just down from here, in the exact location where the Clydeside docks once sat, the world leaders are going to join together to determine what could become the most important milestone in addressing climate change yet. Something like 90% of the electricity we now consume in Scotland is powered by renewable sources. And that's a massive change. And it's a great success story for us to tell the world and showcase to the world. Glasgow's transformation hasn't happened by chance. Scotland was an early adopter, making a conscious decision that the only way for the future was a clean, green, renewable future. At Scottish Power, we've been pioneers in that journey. We were the first large energy company to go 100% green. We've closed all of our coal plant, ditched gas, and we've invested and built onshore, offshore and solar generation, as well as investing heavily in the grid to allow it to take even more renewables on board. Everything we now do as a company, all of our investments, all of our actions are all determined and seen through the prism of net zero. Scottish Power's success has only been possible because of the commitments made by successive governments and ambitious local councils like Glasgow, by creating an environment in which it makes sense for us to invest and develop renewable technology. Together, by keeping our eyes on the net zero prize, we've been able to create a market and drive down the cost of renewables to the point that wind power is now the cheapest form of generation on the system. 20 years ago, again, that would have been unthinkable, but together we've done it. Our experience is rightly now the envy of the world. We've come a long way, but as you know, there's much, much more still to do. For our own part, over the next 5 years, we plan to invest £10 billion in the United Kingdom in renewables, the network, battery storage and green hydrogen. It's taken us 20 years to build our current wind portfolio, and our aim is to treble that over the next decade. Alongside that, we're starting to couple up and bring technologies together to make the very best out of each of our sites. Using solar and battery storage at our existing wind farms, along with green hydrogen, will create a synergy that ensures all of the wind energy is used and nothing goes to waste. We're speeding up, and we need to. We've got to speed up and not slow down. And the government and local authorities have a powerful enabling role to play in encouraging waves of future investment and innovation from industry. We may have come a long way in decarbonising the power sector, but we need a massive concerted effort now to do the same for transport, domestic heating and industry. And one thing is for sure, we can't just rely on existing technology to do all of that for us. As we move into the next phase of the energy revolution, the UK is uniquely placed to lead the way. We're not afraid of ambitious targets. We welcome them, but we need to make sure these plans survive the contact in the real world. We need to keep the pressure up to make sure that the targets are driven right down through the system. There can be no mismatch between the scale of the government's ambition and the pace at which industry is actually allowed to deliver. The regulator, the planning systems and industry all need to step up their challenge to go faster and faster and faster. Staying at the front of the pack needs bold decisions. They need to be taken at speed if we want to match our net zero ambition. From removing gas from home heating systems through to the installation of an EV charging network that leaves no one behind, we're committed to backing all of those decisions with investment in infrastructure, jobs and investments directly into the benefit of all of our communities. Throughout my years in the energy industry, I've seen how innovation and the scaling up of technologies can be an incredibly powerful driver for change. We've seen it with onshore and offshore wind, and I've every confidence we'll see similar levels of innovation and drive all the way through the electrification of transport and the decarbonisation of the heat system. Green hydrogen is also part of the same story for the future. Using renewables to power clean energy for intensive energy users and heavy vehicles, this is a massive new growth vector that simply wasn't even talked about 2 years ago. As a leader in renewables revolution in Glasgow, it's fitting that the host for COP is the Glasgow city. It's a fantastic, fantastic opportunity. And given the leadership that the UK and Scotland have shown so far, we're perfectly placed as the launchpad for a renewed global leadership on tackling climate change. COP26 is a fantastic opportunity to showcase what's already been achieved across the UK on the journey to net zero, but it's also a brilliant opportunity for us to learn from others and share our knowledge and our experience. However, we know much more must also be done on emissions if we're to achieve the 2015 Paris Agreement of limiting global temperatures to 2 degrees. And by the end of the century, we know it's even tougher if we want to hit that more ambitious target of 1.5 degrees. The COP conference will be hugely important in determining the global efforts and the step up of action that we need to lessen the impacts of climate change right across the whole of the world. We need to use COP26 to focus our minds, to drive momentum across governments, the energy sector, the investment audience, and we also need to see what action needs to be taken now to deliver and make our commitments become real on net zero. To accelerate the next wave of that transition, to tackle decarbonisation in other sectors, we need more innovation in things like green hydrogen, as well as the electrification of the transport system and the decarbonisation of the heat system. As a principal partner for COP26 in Glasgow this year, we're committed to making the event a success and creating a huge legacy for our country. Achieving these ambitious targets and meeting net zero is not only good for the environment and society, but it's also good for the economy and for the business and for all of our communities. Thank you.
And thank you to Keith Anderson of Scottish Power. Well, we're turning now to another key sector for the city. And Katie Murray, she's been the Chief Financial Officer for the NatWest Group since January 2019. Prior to that, she had roles within the group as Director of Finance and Deputy CFO. Katie's a chartered accountant with over 30 years' experience covering all areas of financial services, including capital management and investor relations. She's a passionate member of A4S, the Prince of Wales's charitable organisation, where she is driving the climate change agenda via the Finance Director's Office. And just last month, NatWest, RBS Group, announced it's going to provide £100 billion of climate-friendly funding, including new green loans to support customers in their transition to net zero. Katie, over to you.
Hello and good morning or good afternoon wherever you're joining from. I know that there are 10 countries represented here today, which is really great to see. I'm Katie Murray, Group Finance Officer at NatWest Group. And I'm so looking forward to seeing you all on the 2nd of November for the Climate Chamber Mission event at COP26. I know one of the key things we'll be discussing later is how businesses and organisations can collaborate internationally to deliver on COP26 ambitions. And I wanted to start by recognising the role you're all playing in this by being here today. We're all privileged to be living together on a single planet, which is threatened by our actions. And without global cooperation, we cannot tackle these problems. The more forums we have to collaborate, share innovations, listen to one another, and learn from one another, the better. And our global chambers are playing a key role in bringing us all together and connecting like-minded people and businesses. Thank you. I was particularly excited when Glasgow was announced as the host city for COP26. I remember listening to the news in 2019 when Glasgow City Council announced a climate and ecological emergency and the formation of a working group, and that produced 61 recommendations on how the city could respond to this. These are a few things that stood out for me. By 2023, polluting vehicles will be banned from the city centre. That's only 13 months away. The development of a circular economy route map, setting out how Glasgow can achieve economic circularity by 2045. 2020, the target for the city to be carbon neutral, and the commitment to collaborate together and break down barriers to succeed. Glasgow all counts a very worthy host for COP26. And being here actually brings me home. Glasgow is where I went to school, where I went to university. I have family in Glasgow. I'll be staying at my dad's during COP26. I have very close ties still with Glasgow Caledonian University, where I studied to be an accountant. And even though I now live in London, I enjoy coming back to Glasgow and seeing the evolution in this city. This is certainly where my roots are. As a bank, we're a proud sponsor of our Scottish heritage. The bank was founded by corporation by Royal Charter in Edinburgh back in 1727. In an ever-changing banking world, the Royal Bank has a strong level of innovation and is now one of the largest employers in Scotland. We support 1 in 3 businesses in Scotland, 1 in 5 people, and 1 in 7 home buyers. The bank is the biggest supporter of businesses in Scotland, from startups to the very largest corporations. We know we have a pivotal role in leading the transition to a low carbon economy and supporting our customers, colleagues and communities with this transition too. Climate, along with enterprise and learning, is one of our 3 key areas of focus. We know our efforts in these areas will increase resilience and long-term value of our customers and drive sustainable returns, and that is a critical part of being a purpose-led bank, which champions potential, helping families, people and businesses to thrive. And we're using COP as a platform to demonstrate ways for people and businesses to tackle climate change, including through some new research we published a few weeks ago, exploring the role of SMEs in the UK's journey to net zero. The goal of NatWest research is to provide practical guidance to the SMEs we serve and demonstrate the opportunity for the UK economy and the environment if public and private sectors work together to provide SMEs with the support that they really need. Some of the key findings of our research include half of the UK's carbon reduction ambition can be delivered by the country's SME sector. Almost all studies and interventions aimed at reducing carbon emissions have focused on the role of corporate sector, but SMEs play a critical role in the UK and global economies. There is a revenue opportunity of over 160 billion for the SMEs as a result of the drive to tackle climate change, ranging from farming practices to heat pump installations. SMEs contribute to around 30% of the UK's total emissions. With the right support from organisations like NatWest, this is an opportunity for SMEs rather than a burden. 130,000 new jobs could be created the SME sector alone across the UK if the opportunities to support the transition to net zero are harnessed. Some of our recommendations include boosting SMEs' knowledge of their climate impact and measuring this, creating funding opportunities that really reflect the social benefit of the SME activity, awareness to help SMEs recognise the strengthening opportunity from climate action, skills and capabilities build. SMEs need support to develop new skills to deliver a business transition, and support with navigating the complex and evolving landscape, including prioritising different opportunities, understanding what support is actually available today, and ultimately realising the benefit to their businesses. I was fortunate enough to visit a customer called the Scottish Leather Group last year, who manufacture low carbon leather using a circular approach for some of the world's most respected companies. Low carbon and leather are not words that naturally fit together, but they made it really clear that they see a sustainable manufacturing as an opportunity, not as a limitation, and aim to be carbon neutral by 2025. Quite a feat for a player in that industry, and a huge opportunity to stand out. I know that Scottish Leather Group are expected to join the event today, and I really do look forward to seeing them later. I have to say it was one of the best classes I did last year. We've also announced a target to provide 100 billion of climate and sustainable funding and financing to customers by the end of 2025. And we have plans to launch a new green loan product for SME customers, as well as new specialist accelerators for clean transport and circular economy, new tools for business to monitor their carbon footprint, and mandatory climate training for all of our relationship managers. This marks an acceleration in our ambition to support UK decarbonisation and the UK government's net zero strategy. The report and its initiatives are intended to support our efforts to halve the bank's financed emissions by 2030 and to meet the net zero targets by 2050, in line with our commitments as a founding member of the Net Zero Banking Alliance. As I've said though, this is a team effort, and for me, COP26 is about building and cementing powerful partnerships to bring about change at speed, because we all know that the clock is ticking and that time is running out, and that this unique opportunity to create lasting change together. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you about this later. But for now, I'm going to leave you with a video of Chris Davis, the founder and CEO of Harvest London, a vertical farming company working with customers to improve the sustainability of the food system. Thanks very much.
My name is Chris Davis. I'm the founder and CEO of Harvest London. Harvest London are a vertical farming company, and we work with our customers to improve the sustainability of the food system to which we all belong. Vertical farming is the practice of growing vegetables and fruits indoors using hydroponic technology. 85% of the produce in this country comes from outside this country. And with the challenges that we faced around Brexit, COVID, even the Suez Canal debacle, a totally global food system where we're relying on significant amounts of import might not necessarily be the best idea. So it's all about localizing as much of the food production that we need and doing that very sustainably. NatWest has been great in supporting us and our growth plans. Apart from being part of the NatWest Climate Accelerator, the bank has been great in introducing us to parts of the bank that have an inherent interest in what we do. So it's really been opening doors, in particular around agriculture and asset financing. Ag tech companies, vertical farming companies tend to be very asset intensive, very asset heavy. So that makes a relationship with someone like NatWest all the more important, because NatWest have the capability of being able to drive significant momentum, and it's about being able to get that access to capital that allows companies like mine and the wider industry to leverage on these proven technologies.
Chris Davis of Harvest London. I thought that was absolutely fascinating, and thanks to Katie Murray of the NatWest Group as well for introducing us to him. We're going to move on. Mark de Wit is up next. Mark is Director of Strategic Alliances for Circle Economy, an impact organisation that guides businesses, cities and nations towards adoption of a circular system. Mark is a recognised thought leader on implementation of the circular economy. In 2018, he initiated the Circularity Gap Report, an annual yardstick for the circular state of the global economy. We know him very well. Mark was one of the Chamber's original partners since the outset of the Chamber's Circular Glasgow work 5 years ago. He's bagged nearly 15 years of strategy and implementation experience, advising companies and governments in developing circular strategies and implementing circular solutions. Over to you, Mark.
Hello, my name is Mark de Wit. I'm with Circle Economy, an impact organization based in Amsterdam, and we help businesses, cities, and nations to transform to a circular economy. We help them implement tangible solutions to become more circular. And in my presentation today, I want to speak about the role that businesses can play in moving to a circular economy, and with that, close the circularity gap. So first of all, I want to talk about the hidden currents of our lives, the massive flows of raw materials and products used by 7.7 billion humans to such a wonderful and at the same time damaging effect. Today, every one of us uses 34 kilograms of stuff. That's the phone you use to call your friends, the breakfast you just had, the clothes you're wearing, the car that drove you to work, and even the bricks in your house. And of that 34 kilograms, 31 kilogram is wasted. These products are designed, manufactured, transported, sold, maintained, and eventually processed as waste by companies. And today, most of this waste is scattered irretrievably. Plastic trash drifts into our rivers and oceans, so to the nitrates and phosphates from our fertilized fields. A third of all our food rots, even if we deforest the Amazon to produce more. Think of an environmental problem and chances are it is connected to waste. Ultimately, 90% of all the hard-won stuff we use slips through our fingers and ends up as waste. Or on the flip side of that, less than 10%, 9% to be exact, actually makes it back into our economy. We could say that our planet today is only 9% circular, leaving a massive circularity gap. And it is important to understand that essentially 4 types of raw materials, minerals, ores, fossil fuels, and biomass become the products and services that meet our basic human needs. Sand goes into concrete apartment towers on 6 continents. Metal ore becomes the ships, the cars, and also the combine harvesters to harvest the crops that feed us all. Fossil fuels power the vehicles, keep us warm, become plastic, become all kinds of things. And again, this all adds up to more than 100 billion tons. But what does all of that have to do with climate breakdown and emissions? We now live in a world that's 1.1 degree warmer compared to pre-industrial levels when the industrial revolution started 200 years ago. And this is because we have burned fossil fuels and scattered the waste, the carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere. We have seen this year how our planet deals with a 1.1 degree warming, devastating storms and heat waves in North America, floods throughout Europe and China, wildfires from Greece to California and Australia, and most recently, food shortages in Madagascar due to record droughts. The list goes on. And our material use has played a huge part in this climate breakdown. Our Circularity Gap Report of last January revealed that nearly 70% of all the greenhouse gases emitted are related in one way or the other to material handling, from extraction to processing and use. This proves how vital it is to look beyond the narrow focus of the current climate pledges to make a real impact. And against the backdrop of a 1.1 degree warmer world, catastrophic weather events, and increased material consumption, it's clear that the speed and the scale of our current commitments fall short. Time is running out. Even if all countries and businesses that pledged climate action as part of the Paris Agreement fulfill their emission-cutting promises, the rise in temperatures is still forecast to hit 3.2 degrees this century. If we do not even manage to reach what we have currently pledged, a warming between 4 and 6 degrees can be the outlook. We are already past the point of minor amends. Course correction will require a major transformational gear change in systemic thinking. This big shift is the circular economy. Society finds itself currently standing at an historic economic and cultural tipping point. Do we continue to tweak and tamper with our broken linear model, or do we pivot to a circular economy? But how do we do that? In the end, we do need materials to fuel our lifestyles, which produce emissions. In a circular economy, we need to adopt 4 key principles: using less resources, using resources longer, using resources again, and using clean resources. Businesses are driving this transition and I want to provide examples of how these 4 strategies across sectors are moving the needle. In using less, the overall level of materials flowing into an economy and the emissions they bring will be lower. For example, when houses are built using different materials or different construction techniques, like 3D printed houses that use efficient fabrication techniques that have a tremendous potential to reduce scrap and reduce material transport. In using resources for longer, the entire lifetime of a resource, from first use to end of use, is extended. For example, when electronics like your phone are designed for repairability, the functional lifetime can be extended beyond what has become the norm today. In using resources again, embodied emissions in materials can be removed. The largest volume of waste currently comes from demolition of buildings, and only 1/3 is reused. When these materials get diverted from landfill and instead reused in buildings, in the building of new houses, this can have enormous effects. In making resources clean, material focus on bio-based alternatives instead of fossil fuels, for example, in the production of plastics, and more generally in designing out of toxins. Combined, our 2021 Circularity Gap Report found that a global circular economy could cut global greenhouse gas emissions by nearly 40% and limit the global temperature rise to well below 2 degrees. To get the global economy on a pathway towards circularity and a well below 2 degree world, major course corrections are needed. The extent to which interventions are able to mitigate climate breakdown and curb material use globally. To put emissions in a structural decline, large shift and increased, much steeper targets by businesses are needed. As we have seen, the twin agendas of a circular economy and climate mitigation can get us on that path to that well below 2 degree world, even a 1.5 degree warming. Businesses have a crucial role in paving that systemic transformation to course correct the global economy. Coming back to the 34 kilograms of materials that we all use, that needs to drop dramatically, as does the proportion that goes to waste. We currently waste 90% of what we use. We keep the value of only 10%, and we need to flip that around, keep the 90. But doing this will require transformational activity, adoption of new business models. And the good news is that momentum is already building towards adoption of circular economic models, So we have a choice. I personally have been in this field nearly 10 years, and I've seen the change happen in front of my eyes. Adoption and awareness at businesses, implementation of new ideas, where it starts to move from the fringes to the mainstream. We will also be hearing from tangible examples of circularity in action in the sessions today. So my hope is that Glasgow can be on the right side of history as the pivotal moment where world leaders align on transformational rather than incremental thinking. We have no time to lose. I would like to extend my thanks to the organizers, and I wish everyone a fabulous exchange. Thank you very much.
And thank you to Mark DeWitt. A lot to think about. It's time for our final keynote of the first session. It's Dave Ingram. And if that name's familiar, it's because Dave is the Chief Procurement Officer for Unilever, a Scot now based in Singapore. Dave's all about purpose, procurement, partnerships, and people. Dave's passionate about supporting Unilever's purpose to make sustainable living commonplace, ensuring they deliver on commitments to halving their use of virgin plastic in packing and to collect and process more plastic packaging than they sell by 2025. Now, add to that some tracking innovations and trends in the procurement space, both within Unilever and externally, and you can see he means business. In case all that doesn't convince you, he leads the team responsible for the procurement of all goods and services globally, supporting the creation of over 400 brands sold in over 190 countries. Ultimately, Unilever's aim is to buy sustainably, buy better, and grow together. That's quite a responsibility. Over to you, Dave.
Hi, my name is Dave Ingram. I'm the Chief Procurement Officer at Unilever. On the question of what does a good COP26 look like? So climate change is the most serious long-term risk that we face as a business, and clearly we're not alone in this. The next decade for all of us is make or break for our climate. But as a world community, we're not on track to keep the global temperature rise to within 1.5 degrees centigrade. So COP26 must be the moment when the Paris Agreement goes from a contract in principle to an action plan in practice. That's why we're calling for a huge step up in ambition and action from governments and businesses in the run-up to and during COP26. Specifically, we want countries to strengthen their emissions reduction plans to keep the 1.5 degree limit within reach. We want them to set net zero targets, but also interim targets for 2025 and 2030. And put in place real policy change measures. Recognition of the importance of nature-based solutions to climate change. We're also calling for policies that end deforestation, encourage restoration, or support sustainable agriculture. Can be some of our quickest, most cost-effective wins in the fight against climate change. A combination of carbon pricing, ambitious renewable energy targets, regulation to phase out coal and other fossil fuels will all make a significant difference. And lastly, and also very importantly, is a commitment to put people at the heart of that climate transition agenda. People who are so important with respect to, if it's in nature, being the stewards of our land, and the people that are most impacted with our inequality that's around us in agricultural systems. On the question of tell us more about Unilever's sustainable strategy and agenda for net zero. In response to the climate crisis, we have set a net zero target for 2039 for all our products, and this joins our existing science-based targets, which were set as part of our sustainable living plan. There are two elements of this to be achieved by 2030. First, to have no carbon emissions from our own operations, and secondly, to halve the greenhouse gas footprint of our products across the value chain. Our Climate Transition Action Plan, CTAP as we call it, outlines our targets and how we will achieve them. We made this public earlier in the year and also put it to a shareholder vote in which we got more than 99% approval. A key component of achieving the plan is partnering with suppliers to set and deliver their own climate transition plan as part of our emissions and within our own upstream Scope 3 footprint. This includes the Unilever Climate Promise, where we're asking our suppliers for three things. Firstly, to set a public climate target to have absolute greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. Secondly, to publicly report progress towards meeting that target. And third, to share greenhouse gas emissions and footprint data with us. This is open to any one of our 56,000 suppliers, but there are 300 that we've identified as priority suppliers. They contribute almost 2/3 of our footprint. I've spoken about the role of business and government. Every single one of us, every single person needs to be aware of our own measures and our own ability to be net zero by 2050 at the very latest. It's really hard to do that if you can't measure or you don't know your footprint. People need to know where their impact is so that they can make informed choices about what they do or what they purchase. So transparency of footprints will be an accelerator in the race to zero emissions. And it's our ambition to communicate the carbon footprint of every product we sell. We know that consumers increasingly care about this, and as a result of this transparency, we obviously hope they purchase our products. We really do know that brands that have climate and social commitments as part of their offering grow more than those that don't. On the question of, with the UN reporting a red alert for the planet, what needs to happen? The world is facing multiple crises, from the pandemic that grips our society today, to the warming of our planet and the loss of its nature to growing inequality around us. These are multiple existential crises. The urgency is clear. Many experts, including the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, say that we only have 10 years to save our planet's natural systems. It's becoming increasingly clear that these issues are all interconnected. If we just look at climate, we know that 37% of solutions for climate are going to come from nature. As I mentioned earlier, we know that the stewards of the land, the farmers, the smallholder farmers, are critical to improving that nature equation. The circular economy can be a really important instrument to decouple economic growth from resources use and environmental impact, and provide a more economic, resilient operation. At Unilever, we believe that circular principles are at the heart of this transition, both in terms of reducing the resources we use, and for those resources we do use, to design to keep them in a circular loop. We see this in our packaging strategy, where we have set commitments to reduce the total amount of plastic we're using, make our packaging fully recyclable, and to use more recycled content in our packaging. But this transition goes beyond recycling plastic. As the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and others have shown, in a truly sustainable economy, circularity is a lens through which we can consider all material flows. Circular principles can apply to every part of the economy, and we have sought to apply these principles across our sustainable strategy at Unilever. There are three areas we believe are particularly important. First one I've mentioned, closing the loop on plastics. Secondly, shifting to circular feedstocks and fuels. You'll have seen from an announcement of our home care business around Cleaner Future. And third, regenerative agriculture, making soil health at the very centre of our agricultural operations. This agenda can drive innovation and investment in new kinds of infrastructure, and it can also create jobs. This transition won't happen by accident, however. The shift must be intentional, informed by science, and will require both business leadership as well as policy reinforcement. With the right incentives, we can shift to a low-carbon, resilient economy that our planet and our society so urgently needs. On the question of what do you hope COP26 will achieve, transformative climate action will only be realised through public, private, and civil society coming together. My hope is that decisive action is taken and ahead of us in this decade of delivery. The global race is on. It's a race we will win or lose together.
And thanks very much to Dave Ingram of Unilever and to all the keynotes who are going to come together for a panel discussion with me. Sadly not Susan Aiken. She's a bit busy at the moment, rushing about hosting for COP26. But we've got Paul Little with us here. We're so happy about that. He's scribbling notes ferociously as we listen to the wonderful contributions from you guys. So we're going to have questions from the audience, hopefully, as well. Please take part by using the Hop-In app if you can, or just feel free to listen and absorb it, whether you're on a screen or you're here with us in the city of Glasgow College. Lovely to see our contributors up on the screen. So we've got Paul, we've got Katie, Dave, Keith and Mark. And I'm going to ask you all a really big question to start with. Maybe Katie can kick us off. Your starter for 10, Katie, no pressure. How ambitious? No pressure. No pressure. How ambitious does COP26 need to be for the sake of the planet? Small one.
Oh, I mean, it needs to be wildly ambitious in terms of what it seeks to achieve. I think so much of what we're all trying to do via our various different organisations and in working with our different local countries. And what COP26 needs to do is to knit it all together so that there's one solution that we're all working towards, understood. And I think for me, you wouldn't be surprised by this from the CFO, something that is verifiable and measurable, so that we can really see that we're making great progress in terms of that. But I do think that the bar is being set really high. You'll have seen from the world leader speeches yesterday that the view really is this is our chance and we need to make sure that we take it so that we can look in reality at our children and say we did what we needed to do at the time. So I think the level of pressure on those in the decision-making rooms is really, really hard. So let's set that ambition really high. Let's make something we can really measure and track. Let's celebrate the wild successes and work on the things that are really challenging so that we can move it forward.
Katie, feeling optimistic? I mean, I know we're in the foothills of the discussions already, but what's the vibe?
No, look, I feel really optimistic. I spent the day yesterday in the conference and then at meetings yesterday evening as well. Look, it's something people really want this. They really need it. They recognise how important it is. They realise it's a conversation that has to happen, obviously in the blue zone with the people who are writing the rules, but they're listening to the people who are outside, the demonstrators, listening to us as the companies as to how do we really make it. I think when I look at COP26 this time, it's a real connectivity of the individual, business and governments all working together and really accepting that actually there's a kind of triangle, and triangle is too simplistic. There's some sort of geodesy sort of formula where we're all kind of connected, and actually it's through all the activities that we do that we'll take there. So I think at this stage it's always the beginning of a conference is massive kind of hope and ambition for the future. I believe there's real push behind that, and I really encourage the policy setters to go as far as they can. They will, as David Attenborough said yesterday, they will have to make some compromises, but pick them well, so that we can get to the right outcome together.
Excellent. Let's move on to Keith and that big question again for you, Keith. How ambitious does COP26 need to be for the sake of the planet?
Hi, look, yeah, thank you and welcome. It does need to be hugely ambitious. I think that there's absolutely no doubt about that. But I think this COP is a bit different than previous COPs in terms of how do you set out that ambition and how do you achieve the ambition. I think this time, obviously, what the governments agree and the official negotiations agree is incredibly important and critical. And I think David Attenborough, of all the speeches on day one, David Attenborough kind of laid it out in words of one syllable in terms of the task ahead and the importance of the task ahead. But I think at this COP, it's as much also about what companies can do, what the finance community can do, what other institutions can do as well, because what you're seeing now is a massive movement of investment, of finance, of capital, of industrialization, which is shifting the dial on tackling climate change. And in some cases, going faster than governments. And if not going faster than governments, that finance community, the business community, it can actually influence and seriously push governments in the right direction as well. So, no matter what the official negotiations do or don't settle on and what they do or don't agree, yes, it is incredibly important. But as important now, I think, is the whole business landscape and what it's pushing and what it's looking to do. And there's some great stories out there to push that. And I think, in the UK, Over the last 30 years, GDP's gone up by 80%, emissions have gone down by 40%. So there's lots of good stories to tell that actually you can tackle climate change and still grow your economy. You can tackle climate change and still create wealth. You can tackle climate change and create jobs, manufacturing opportunities. There's a big positive target to go after there. And I think that is now becoming as important as the official negotiations.
Let's turn to Mark. And Mark, from just hearing you speaking to us a few minutes ago, you were tempering some optimism with some realism as well. What's your vibe about how ambitious it all has to be? Just what's the scale of the effort in front of us now?
Well, obviously, it's massive, and it needs to be hugely ambitious. I mean, I think it also stands in a long legacy of COPs, where some of the names of the cities these conferences were held still resonate with us today, like Kyoto, definitely Paris, Poznan, and other parts. Let me switch on the light here. Apologies.
I love this. This is live. I love it. I would help you if I could, but it's a bit of a distance.
Yeah. So this is an energy-saving lamp in the place.
You had to use energy to fix it.
This
Yeah.
is what happened. So at least I'm contributing my part. But no, obviously very ambitious. But I think indeed, as was just said, not necessarily in terms of statements and kind of far out ambitions, but also in terms of fixing some of the mechanisms needed to really trigger the action on the ground. And what I've just said, I think my plea would also be to not only look at kind of the current kind of pledges that are very much focused on, for example, agriculture, on renewable energy, but also take into account the material side of things, because so much is really impacted there. And what my plea would be is to not only look at kind of doing things a little less bad, but really fundamentally better. So being able to think very creatively, but also fundamentally in what we need to alter. And I think one element of that is how we define growth. So I think in terms of GDP and what is more, maybe we need to strive for a bit less. So really making the switch for thinking and counting in terms of quantity, and rather move to thinking about the quality. So thinking about the quality of our lives, how we can thrive with doing less, actually.
Thank you for those thoughts. So a bit of a clap there. You can clap. We can clap our contributors. I'm very happy to clap. I think we all agree with you there. So good cop, bad cop. Paul's sitting beside me here, and you were concurring with a lot of that. Paul, what do you? Well, you want to react to what you heard from Mark there, and then move on.
I mean, I think language is important here.
Yeah.
And I think we've moved beyond ambition. I've got 40,000 Gretas at the City of Glasgow College, and they're part of the COVID generation, and they don't want to know any more about the blah blah of ambition. They just want delivery, not delay. Their future is at stake here, and the grandchildren, our great-grandchildren are at stake, and they're looking for that just transition, and they're looking for those green skills, and they're looking for a better future, a greener future, a fairer future. And quite honestly, we adults are way behind the curve when it comes to these young people, and they're impatient with us, and they're rightly impatient with us, because quite honestly, we are far too complacent. We, as baby boomers, have enjoyed a lot of prosperity after the wars. They don't enjoy that future. There's no need to think that the future is a linear future. I am very much at the sharp end and seeing deepening inequality, blighted futures, and the pandemic has made that worse. So I am in full agreement with the level of ambition, but we've done that in Paris. Glasgow has to be about the how and actually the when.
So what's going to be good enough then? What would you like to see at the very least emerging from this?
Well, it's not what I like to see, it's what I want to see for my young people and our future and that talent pipeline. I want to see them having access to those green skills. I want to see education for the many, not the few. I want to see that the young people can reconnect with our politicians and our political leaders and our business leaders. And for example, where are the placements that they are going to need? Where are the apprenticeships? 95% were decimated in the last 2 years. Where are the green companies that are actually hiring the younger individuals rather than the older individuals? That's what I really want to see.
Thank you for that, Paul. Dave, going to ask you, clap for Paul as well. Amen to all that. Dave, I'm going to ask you, generally, what would a good COP26 look like to you?
I think there's very common themes. I think the ambition was set 6 years ago, so we don't need to keep talking about ambition. I think it does need action. It needs shorter term, time-based targets. I think it needs much more visibility and transparency. We want to see as consumers, as all of us as consumers, we want to see what our impact is. We can't make any choices until we can see that impact on everything we buy. So driving that sort of transparency, I think, is going to be critical. I think for governments, organisations like ours and Unilever, it's going to need to involve difficult choices. If we won't get to where we need to be by this being easy. So, are we facing up to those difficult choices, I think, is a key question for this week. And actually, raising them firstly and then addressing them as well. And as someone said earlier, for us, a fundamental part of it is around nature and it is around social. These things of climate, nature, and social all fit together. The ecosystems are absolutely intertwined. So a commitment to nature, a commitment to deforestation, a commitment to regeneration of land and soil is equally important and is fundamental to the climate debate. And we'll get that through inclusion of farmers and inclusion of farm workers, which we think is really important. So all of those things we'd like to see engaged in this week.
Had a bit of progress today, haven't we, on deforestation, and let's hope things continue in that trend. But let me address this to you, Keith. I'm looking specifically at what Glasgow and Scotland's ambitions for sustainability and for the circular economy are. What do you think they are? Do you think they're good enough?
Yeah, look, I think Scotland's always been a real leader in terms of trying to push the whole climate debate and setting targets and ambitions. And I think the great thing for Scotland is not only have they in the past set ambitious targets, but we've actually delivered on them and delivered against them. And that to me is it's one of the big conundrums about everything that goes on around the COP or everything that's going on around the world, where there are you go all the way back to Paris, lots of ambitious statements being made, but the delivery isn't quite as well evidenced. And I think Scotland's been actually quite good at that, in terms of the targets that were set for renewables. We're up to sort of over 90%, 95% of energy coming from renewable sources. So it fluctuates a bit from year to year, obviously, but we are actually delivering against some of those big hard targets. The challenge for Scotland now is it gets tougher and tougher. This is the same everywhere, which is doing electricity generation was the easy bit. Doing transport's a bit more difficult. Doing heat is even more difficult. And then doing food and agriculture becomes even more difficult. And the timeline's getting shorter and shorter. It's taken us 20 to 25 years to get to where we are today on electricity generation. We have 25 years left to do the rest of electricity generation and transport and heat and food. And that just shows you. So the critical thing now is about speed and pace. And it's speed and pace of delivery, not speed and pace of setting more ambitious targets. It's all about delivery. And this is where we need to really start to see wholesale shift and changes in the way we do things. This applies equally to Scotland as the whole of the UK, as the rest of the world. We are still tending to run everything in the country with the same processes that were designed 10 and 15 years ago, whether it's the planning system, environmental legislation, etc., etc. We can't carry on using those processes. We can't carry on doing things the way we used to do because we do not have that amount of time. So I think the big challenge now for Scotland and for the rest of the UK is what compromises are you going to make in those processes? What changes are you going to make around the way you allow stuff to be delivered? Because it has to be 3-4 times as fast. So we as a company have installed all of the wind we've got onshore and offshore over the last 25 years. I want to treble it in the next 10 years. Now, I've got the money to do it. I've got the projects to do it. Can they get through the system fast enough? There's the challenge, because there's lots of ambition, but we need to see the delivery, and that's the big challenge for everyone now.
Maybe I could ask you about that, Mark. That's the frustration, isn't it? Intentions are great, but actually you've got to make it happen pragmatically, and that is a problem.
Yeah, it absolutely is. But I think it's a very kind of fair statement to say, kind of coming from a business, we are ready. We even have the funding, but there are elements in the system that we need to change. And I think one big aspect of that, which usually makes it into the debate, but hardly ever in practice, is kind of tax. How can we kind of tax the externalities like the emissions, and kind of really with that kind of give a fair and a good push to renewables. And it was just mentioned that 20 years ago, we couldn't have imagined where we stand today when it comes to wind with solar power. But I think we need to drive that transition much more aggressively, looking at new sectors that have been out of these schemes for decades, for years. So really, if you look for kind of key levers in this debate moving that forward, if you come from a business that's ready to go, I think that is one of the elements we really need to look at. Also, in terms of solidarity and mechanisms between kind of the countries that are kind of the Western countries and the global South. How kind of can you get a mechanism going to fix that? So I think that will definitely be a big element.
One for Katie now about circularity. How important, Katie, do you think circularity is as an enabler to net zero, the holy grail?
Conscious this is really Mark's specialist topic in terms of the role that he does in his strategic alliances. But I think the circular economy is something that is important. I think it's something that Glasgow's done particularly well. I spent a day up with you pre-COVID visiting different kind of circular businesses. And I think in visiting some of those businesses, actually what it really did for me was opened up your eyes to actually, there was almost no limit. One business I visited, it brought very dirty kind of production in and used the whole circular economy and was generating its own electricity to get a really clean, high quality product out at the other end that I would just never have imagined. So I think the thing about the circular economy, I worry that sometimes it's still a bit niche and it's not well enough understood. And actually, when you first read about it, you think, how could you possibly manage in a big factory to replace all of your impact so that actually you were working in a circular way? And then when you begin to understand it, you can see that actually it's possible. And I think that's where companies like ours have got real responsibilities. We run a lot of accelerator hubs, which are places where new businesses can come and start up. And what we're looking at to do is to say, actually, how can we have some of those accelerator hubs specialised and looking really at the circular economy so that they're able to meet like-minded entrepreneurs and really learn from each other. Because I think that the circular piece is definitely, it's an important lever that we can pull. And it ultimately, when you get to the right level and the tipping point, and Mark, you'll have much better comments than I on this, it's self-sustaining. And that must be the holy grail of what we're trying to do. But it's also, I do think when I was first looking at it, and remember reading, I've got to go and talk about this, I'm thinking, well, it's impossible. How could that actually be? But actually, once you scratch below the surface, you realise it's highly possible. And it's an important lever for us to be pulling.
Mark, if you very briefly want to come back on that, and because I want to move on to Dave and ask him what Unilever's up to in sustainable strategy. So Mark, first of all, briefly.
Yeah, I mean, I fully agree with what was just said. I think what we need to look at is that kind of if we make products, if we keep them in our economy longer, for example, by making them repairable, if we make sure that they are designed in a way that we can kind of repair them, but end of day also recycle them. I think there are many elements there that are so connected to emissions, etc. And we need to understand that better and really kind of look at the parts in the economy where we can fix that system. Maybe that's kind of just briefly. I can elaborate much more, but for now, that would be
No,
my
that's
statement.
great. Sorry, Paul, you want to jump in as well?
I think we've got some fine business leaders online. We've got some equally fine business leaders with us today. But, you know, the reality of the situation is the Chamber movement has been doing this for some time. I remember Glasgow Chamber 5 or 6 years ago was talking about the circular economy and nobody quite understood it. And so the Glasgow Chamber of Commerce raised the debate, it raised the awareness. I was at a dinner last night with the British Chamber of Commerce and International Chamber of Commerce, and I was profoundly struck by the urgency in those business leaders. Because quite honestly, business gets things done. And the reality is, if you do nothing today other than actually raise the debate with your friends and your colleagues and your supply chain, you'll be doing something very, very important here. I remember another leader in a hurry was John F. Kennedy. And he once said that one person can make a difference and everybody should try. So let's all try as business leaders to inject that sense of urgency, because we all know we face quarterly reports and margin, and we get things done. So let the business community show more leadership here.
Well, Dave, I was going to ask you about Unilever's sustainability strategy, but first maybe you'd like to respond to that and then tell us where your company is in terms of strategy and agenda for net zero.
Yeah, look, as I mentioned earlier, we're committed on 3 axes of climate, nature and social. And circularity, I think, is central and pivotal to all 3 of those. Whether it's climate, like many companies in terms of net zero, we've committed to our own operations, which we've achieved. But we've got a large part of our contribution from our supply base. We work with about 65,000 suppliers around the world. We've honed that down to 300, actually, who make 80% of our difference in Scope 3 emissions. And we're working with them on long-term plans to reduce dramatically carbon within those supply chains and trying to share learnings across peer groups in our supply base. But it is about including them, being open with them, and like us, getting them to commit to targets. So we've asked all of our suppliers to commit to a climate promise, where they commit to the ambition, they commit to measurement, and they commit to being open with us, because our ambition is to have climate on every pack so that every consumer can know what's my impact from buying a Unilever product around the world. We think that will extend over time to be not just the climate impact, but the nature impact and the social impact. So nature commitment to deforestation free is, it's strange to think in this world that we're in 2021 and still talking about it. And it's embarrassing that we are, I think, still talking about it. So we have to deliver that rapidly, and we have to build on this regenerative agriculture. All of that's going to need inclusion of different sets of people, inclusion of our supply base, inclusion of governments, NGOs, and as I mentioned earlier, inclusion of farmers. Without that, we're not going to make the difference we need to make. So on our social agenda, it is about inclusion, it's about fair pay, it's about living wage, and it's about diversity. So that probably sums up our strategy. I just want to finish on the circular, because one of the challenges is, how do you make the finances of this circular? So making some of the physical chains circular is not easy, but we can see how that's possible within plastics or farming. How do you get the proper financing back to farmers, back to the people who are collecting plastics, and ensure that the right profitability of this chain is sitting in the right places to make it function, which today it isn't.
Gosh, you've given us so much food for thought. We have to leave it there. Thank you so much to our wonderful panellists, Katie, Keith, Dave, Mark and Paul. That's all we've got time for at the moment. Lots of questions and comments primed by that. Perhaps the panellists would follow up on some of those later if we get some questions in. Contact details from Glasgow Chamber of Commerce. Can't even say it, Paul. Here's a link, Climate Chamber at glasgowchamberofcommerce.com. We've got a break coming up. Time to grab a cup of tea or a bit of coffee as well. So head to your kitchens if you're at home or if you're in the city of Glasgow College. Someone else will sort you out in the atrium outside there and other networking areas outside of this room. I'd only ask that you kind of get back to us for the next session in 15 minutes or so, here at maybe 10 o'clock. I think that would be good if you could be back by 10 o'clock. We're looking forward to seeing you then.